Hello guys, and welcome back to another Java tutorial. So in the last video we wrote a comment, we set up our project, and we set up the main method. So I didn't talk about a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about is this up here. You can see there's a little asterisk right next to main right there, main.java. So that's telling me that this Java file is not saved. So if you're on Windows, you can do Control S. If you're on Mac, you can do Command S. If you're on Linux, I think it's also Control X. And that'll save it. You can also go into File, Save, but I'm not going to be doing that ever. Nobody really does that. They just do Command S or Control S. So then inside of here, this is where you'll write your main code, your starting code. Generally, not a whole lot of code is written in here. Instead, you'll call another method. Writing all your code inside the main method is very bad practice. But I also want to talk about this, so you can probably figure out what this means. I told you that this is a package. You're creating your package. This doesn't show up if you have the default package. This literally tells you and tells the code what package this is in, what file it should be in. So if this doesn't match this, you'll get an error. This has to be the same as this. But it can be helpful if you change this. So let's say you want to have a package called extra. Then you hover over this and you can either change the package name or change this back to main automatically, or you can move this to a new package it'll automatically create called extra. So that's helpful. Another thing is curly brackets. So if you're coming from a language like Python where they don't use these, then you might not know what these are. So if you're using Python, white space matters. So if you have like this is different from this, because if this is not inside of a function. Say you have an if statement. I don't know how if statements are written in Python. I haven't used Python that much. This will run inside of here. You wouldn't have these. So you have an if statement, and then this will run inside of it. Okay. In Java, there's minor exceptions with if statements and for loops and stuff. These brackets are generally they're the white space, so you could technically get rid of all this white space and it'll still run exactly the same. You can see I have no errors here. This will make the eyes of a Python programmer bleed. But these are used to show the scope of things. So things that are in between this and this will run. Things in between this and this are in the class main. Up here should be used just for the package comments and imports. And yeah. And then when you want to write something inside of here, even though technically it'll run off to the side right here, you want to put it right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and this is something that I learned in computer science class, which is you don't need to do this. Actually, I don't know if I ever see anyone do this, but if you are struggling to understand methods versus variables and stuff, you can put you can think of this, because it's object oriented, you can think of this as behaviors. So methods are like behaviors for a class, and I'll get into that later, but that's one way that you can think of it. So instead of methods, you can think of it as behaviors. I'm not going to put that, but if that helps you, you can do that. So now, finally, now that all that extra clarification is out of the way, let's talk about creating variables. In new Java versions, you can do it as var, and I will probably make an entire video on that, but I generally think that it's a better practice to not use that, at least if you're starting out. So I'm going to be going over the Java 8 way. This is why I'm using Java 8. Java 8 has the longest support from Oracle. So chances are, if you're using Java, you're going to be using Java 8. If you're working for like a company, at least currently, that may change in the future. So I'm still going to go over the new way to do it, but not right now. So there are some main variable types that I'm going to explain. Int. This is integers. So this is whole numbers. That's basically it. That's what a lot of people will tell you, but there is a minimum and a maximum value, because this is a 32-bit integer right here. So yeah, that's basically what it is. There's a it's 32-bit. So you can't have a number. You can have a negative 1,000, but you can't have a 0.25 or a negative 0.25, and you also can't have commas in there. That's stuff that's not allowed. It has to be like 1,000 or negative 1,000, 1,200, something like that. So ooh, just sneezed. So that's what an integer is. Then a double, that would be like a double would be it has a decimal in it. It's basically a fraction. So it's got a decimal in it, so it'd be like 0.255, something like that. This is I believe that this is also 32-bit. It might be 64-bit. I know that it's longer than the alternative, which is a float. So it's got a decimal. This is the main thing that you'll be using, at least early on, for decimals. But for smaller numbers, there's a float, which is very similar. So this is also a decimal, but the way that you'll write a float, I'll go over how that's different. So you can think of that right now as a smaller double. It's faster to use this. It takes up less resources. Integer, anytime that you're going to use a number, most of the time you're going to use an integer. That's what the easiest option is, and it's the most resource efficient. Then you're going to also have a, so I'm going to go over, this is just numbers. Number types. These are also called primitive types. So you're also going to have a long. So this is also integers, but 64-bit. So this means that you can literally have larger and smaller numbers. So you can have numbers like that. I don't know if that actually is even in the limit, but with integer, you have less numbers. And I'll go over the minimum and the maximum in another video. I'm not going to go over that now. But if you have an error with a really large or small number in an integer, it's probably because it's over the 32-bit limit and you needed to use a long. So that's what a long is. And then there's also a, should I go over that? No. Okay, anyways, sorry about that. So I'm gonna go over words, word types, if that makes sense. So this is strings and characters and stuff. So there's a string, which if you're using C#, an interesting thing is you can use string or string. In Java, you just use string. There are different uses in C#, and I don't know what other languages use that. Other languages just might have used this. But in Java, it's a capital S. So this is a bit different from these types, and I might spend a video on that. Probably not, but it's different. So ignore all these errors. I'll fix them all in a second. So I didn't say what this was in comments. So this is a string of characters. So this is words. You'll have a value like that. Gibberish, not really, but it needs to be in words, full words in parentheses, and you can have multiple words, not just one. Then the other main one is char. So this is lowercase, and this is going to go in parentheses. So this can only take one character. If you put two characters, they give you an error. Put a space and then another character, will give you an error. So that's what a character is. That's what char stands for. Character. Single characters in parentheses, or not parentheses, apostrophes. That's what I meant. So now we're going to declare variables. There's something called declaring a variable and initializing a variable. A lot of people jump straight to declaring and initializing on the same line, but I'm going to show you declaring first. Int my num. So you just declared the variable my num, double my double, float my float, long my long, string my string, char my char. So normally you're not going to name variables like this. That's also bad practice, but since these aren't representing anything, there's really no other option. You could put like my age, if you're talking about your age, or just age if you only have one age variable. So that's that. So you're going to notice you're going to get warnings on all of these. You should listen to warnings. A lot of people don't listen to warnings. Warnings can be very helpful. You can suppress warnings, but that's not recommended most of the time. So now we're going to go ahead and initialize these variables, and then I'll show you a faster way to do this. So my num, you don't need to declare it again. If you put an int in front of it, it's going to try and make it again, and you will run into problems with that. So my num equals 1. Make it 10, whatever. -10, why not? Just to show that works. So now my num is equal to 10. Sets my number to -10. And then sets my double to 2.502. So now I'm going to set my double equal to 2.502. Sets my float to 2.5. So I'll show you. Oops. My float equal to 2.5. You would think this would work. And actually, I'm going to demonstrate something here. So you would think this would work, but it does not. And if you hover over it, it'll try and it'll tell you to add a cast to it. And I'll go over what the cast is, but I'm not going to do that. This is a double. You need to add an F after it. So you can have another decimal point after 2.5. So I used to think that this could only take 1 because it's smaller than a double. I don't know why I thought that. That's not true. It's just smaller. There's a different minimum and maximum value, but it can take more than 1 decimal place. So that's my float, and then sets my long to 20,000. So int can also take 20,000 as just an illustration that it's, oops, I was still thinking of floats. I don't know what I'm thinking. My long is equal to 20,000. That's just to illustrate that my long is going to have a bigger value than my num usually. So this takes more resources. Avoid using this whenever you can. Yeah. And then sets my string to hello world. String my string is equal to hello world. Oops, didn't mean to include that. And then sets my character to A. My char is equal to A. Something you'll notice that I haven't addressed yet is everything ends in a semicolon. If you're using Swift or Python, or I can't think of any other language that doesn't use them, but there might be, you need this to end a statement in Java. So this is called a method. You need parentheses and methods and constructors, but you can't use that on statements. You need a semicolon. You can also most of the time you're going to use a semicolon. Most of the time you're going to use parentheses on methods and loops and stuff, but sometimes you can use a semicolon, but I'm not going to go over that yet because those aren't used often, especially in small projects and beginner stuff, but for things like interfaces. Then you'll use those. So, man, my allergies. Okay, so that's that, but now let me show you a quicker way to do this. So, it's not the same thing. Okay, let me clarify. Initializing these up here is not the same thing as creating them and then initializing them. You could use code over here, and I'll show you what this is later, but this is printing something out. I'll go over that, but this is printing something out. So if you want to print out my num, okay, it'll tell you my num has not been initialized. And then there's nothing about that I can use, but you'll get an error. And if you are getting a property of this, which I'll go over later, if this is an object, a different kind of object, then you'll get something called a null pointer exception. Actually, I might be able to do that with string. So my string dot equals. Can I do that? No, I can't. I don't have anything. To uppercase. Will that work? No, okay, it still wants me to initialize it. There's a situation that I might even make a whole video about because it happens very often, called null pointer exceptions, where you're trying to get a property of a variable that doesn't equal anything, or you're trying to get the value of a variable that doesn't equal anything, or an object, and it'll return null, and the compiler doesn't like that. So this is different, is what I'm trying to say. You can have code in between here, but if you want this to equal something right off the bat, then you can put this there. And I'm not going to do this for every single one, but I'll show you. You can initialize these on the same line that you declared them. So that's what that does. And yeah, in the next video, I will go over printing things out.